all I wanted to do was start a business. And my first ambition wasn't to rule the world. My first ambition was, could I make as much as I did when I was working for somebody else? I remember very distinctly, I had my first mentor and we were turning over 250,000. And he said, now how do we get this business to 1 million? And I remember going, God, would that be possible? I don't believe I had that ambition. But then when I got 250, we grew it to 1 million. And then when you get it to 1 million, you want to get it to 2 million.
Tom Rowan, thank you very much for joining me.
You're very welcome, Connor. Pleasure to be here.
So let's start with the business, Rowan Engineering. What do you do? Who are the customers? Kind of size, anything you're kind of comfortable sharing?
Certainly. We're a small business of 30 people, plus 2 consultants and 2 members of the board, to be precise. The headquarters is based in Trim, and we also have a satellite office in Oranmore and Galway. And I suppose the vision for the business is to provide excellence with a sense of humour. And we provide 2 different services for our clients. We provide forensic engineering on one side and environmental consultancy on the other. And there's a little bit of crossover between them. I'll try and give you the short version of this. So forensic engineering means we investigate accidents, and then we create a technical report on that accident. And then we advise on the liability based on the engineering and health and safety aspects of that. And then we give evidence in a court case as the expert witness from an engineering and health and safety point of view. So our clients in that business are predominantly insurance companies, loss adjusters, and solicitors. So type of insurance companies we'd work with would be Irish public bodies, or the insurance company for the local authorities, the State Claims Agency, which would be the insurance company for the HSE, An Garda Síochána, the prison services, the Department of Defence, and others like AIG, Zurich, RSA, Allianz, etc. So we deal a lot with insurance companies on that side. And then, just for the hell of it, we did something completely different, which is environmental consultancy. And that business is broken into 5 sections. The first one is licensing and compliance, and we deal a lot with the food and drinks industry there. So clients who I've been working with for years are the likes of the Keepak Group, or Tato Snacks, or West Cork Distillers, Great Northern Distillers, and Cooley Distillery, who have been with us all along for the last 20 years, realistically. And for those, we help them apply for an EPA license, and then we help them remain compliant with that license, or if there are any issues, we try to help them overcome them to become compliant again. We also do environmental impact assessments and environmental planning for projects like renewable energy, wind turbines, solar farms, battery storage facilities, and then also food and drinks industry, and anyone who's looking to extend a premises or requires an environmental impact assessment. The third part of it is environmental due diligence. So we work with a lot of energy companies, and places who are buying and selling facilities. And we will come in and do an environmental due diligence, check if there's any land contamination, assess the contamination, and then give them a plan and project manage how to remediate that. And again, there's a crossover there, insurance companies where there's oil spillages. We would also work for them on the environmental issues of the oil spillage, determine the cause of it, the liability, the extent of the damage, and then give them a plan to remediate any contamination. Fourth part is ESG and sustainability, which speaks for itself. We deal with a lot of Enterprise Ireland clients. And then the fifth and last is drone surveying. And that's kind of just a fun bit that we picked up. That's, it's a bit of crack. Everyone loves a few drones about the place. And we find we use the drones throughout the business. And I just find what drones can do these days is really cool, from volumetric analysis of, a large pile of clay or gravel, and they can tell you how many tons are in it, to counting trees. So that's a really fun part of the business.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to talk about how technology is changing your industry and everything else in a little bit. But I'm very interested in how humour comes into this, right? And how a sense of humour, because when you're talking about insurance companies and court cases and everything, I thought, God, this is very serious. At what stage do you crack it?
Well, I suppose that's what we consider to be slightly different about us, is we do serious things, but we like to do it with a sense of humour. And when I say a sense of humor, well, I like to think there is a sense of humor throughout the team, but we're not hiring people because they're comedians.
Mm-hmm.
We're hiring people that they provide both. That both they have the excellence and the ability of being able to carry out the job, but also that they're personable people. That they're approachable, practical people who get on with the client. And I suppose that's the key thing. It's the engagement in getting on with people. Because a lot of our clients I've been working with for 20 years, and there is a personal relationship with those clients. They have to trust you. They have to believe in your integrity and your professionalism. So within the vision of excellence and a sense of humor, we have 5 core values. Excellence is one. Our integrity is the second one. Professionalism, collaboration with our clients. And you might say, what collaboration do you do with an insurance company? But actually, an insurance company needs to know if they have a bad case or a good case. And it's very important that they trust that you advise them appropriately. And in reality, our duty is to the court in forensic engineering. So we have to maintain that integrity at all times. But then the last part of the core values is balance. Now, I may add, my team overruled me on that. I wanted to be sense of humor, and they've changed that to balance.
How did you get into this business?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I was very fortunate. I went to college in Galway. I was an absolute bum. I had no interest in doing any work. I wanted to play football and party and do as little as possible. And then when I was 23, I tore my cruciate ligament in my knee, which ended my illustrious football career, which involved more partying than playing football, if the truth was told. But so I was on crutches in my best friend's house at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was drinking whiskey. And his dad came down to go to work at 5 in the morning, and he looked at me and he says, Rowan, he says, I don't doubt your ability, but your application is up your arse. You need a job. And he said, start on Monday. And I'm forever grateful. I've met some wonderful people in my life and had great mentors. My father was a great character and taught me how to enjoy life. And a man called Frank Mallon in Liffey Meads taught me how to work. So I turned up with him and as an engineer originally, but I got to do lots of different things. And the wonderful thing, I have a graduate development program with UCD now, and I always advise the students, if you can get into the food and drinks industry, you'll get experience beyond the years that you spend there, because you'll get to do a little bit of everything. So I went in as an engineer. He advised me that engineers need to know how to do the job first before they can engineer it better. So with that, I had a scraper, and I was, I'm trying not to curse, sweet.
You can curse.
I was scraping cow shit for a day, and then a week later I was shooting cattle, and a week later I was using a knife, and I was trying to do butchering skills. And what I soon found out was they were all hard jobs that I wasn't very good at, but I was able to engineer some of them better. And I think it's a really useful thing for anyone who's starting in any engineering career or science career. If you learn the jobs themselves, then you get to understand how to make them better. So it's not all about drawings and stuff like. It's actually about being in the middle of the job, finding out what's tough, finding out what the problem is, and solving that issue.
Was that a shock for you, moving from
being a bum into...
Well, yeah, for want of a better way of saying it, like, was that a shock, and did it take kind of a long time to adjust?
Well, I did 6 years of very enjoyable college. I'd say I adjusted after 2 days of being in the meat industry, because you just had to. You got down and you got stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know what I found? I thrived on it. I enjoyed it. I loved new challenges. I was given loads of different work. I got to travel. So, I as an engineer, they'd kind of give you any job that no one else was doing. So I was very fortunate that, EPA licenses had just begun at the time that I started there. So they went, what's an EPA license? Well, let the engineer do that. So then I got to look after all the environmental aspects, wastewater treatment plants, and all the other factors that entered into it, having an EPA license and managing the environment. I also got to do the health and safety, because that sounds like an engineering job. And then if there was I got to sell beef in Egypt. I'd go over to Egypt with a boat, or I got to go to Russia to a trade show. I went to South Africa and Brazil to hire people because we were struggling with getting Irish labour. So And then all of a sudden, if the production manager or the cold store manager was on holidays, well, I get to do that as well. So you just got this huge experience of lots of different things. And luckily, I was being mentored by a genius, and I got to watch him in action and how he dealt with huge issues and solved problems. Sometimes remain calm and sometimes not so calm, but at the same time, always resolve the problems some way or another. And I think that was a great learning. So that's a really long way of answering your question. But after 7 years, I decided I want to do something for myself. And I didn't know what to do. And I actually went up to Frank and I said, Frank, I want to do something for myself, but I haven't a clue what I'm going to do, but I wanted to mention it to you first. And he says, good man, you're dead right. He says, I could do it you for the next 6 months and I'll be your first customer, whatever you decide to do. And then we worked away for the next 6 months and I had to think about it. And I decided what are the skills that I could transfer from being in the meat industry. One was the environmental consultancy, because I had worked from the very beginning of EPA licenses onwards. And the second part was forensic engineering, because on occasion we'd have an accident at work and I would have to give evidence in that because I understood the meat industry, where sometimes the engineer who came in didn't understand it. And they would write reports that they're using knives, they're very dangerous. And I would go, yes, but you're using knives because there is no other way to create meat,
mm-hmm.
or to create cuts of meat. So I used to bring context into the cases, and that's the reason why we went into environmental consultancy and forensic engineering.
So you started with one customer essentially then, which is I suppose a great way to start a business, that you already had a customer who you knew very well, but you had worked for them for that amount of time.
Absolutely. Like, I was very fortunate. I had a customer, and actually Frank's brother was a solicitor, so he was my second customer.
Okay.
And his son-in-law had another meat company, so they were my third customers. So I was very fortunate that I had built up, I suppose I'd built up, I won't say a reputation, but I built up a network of people I knew in the food and drinks industry. I was well known in the industry, and I knew a lot of people from traveling abroad and going to trade shows and facilities. So I had a customer base from the beginning. Although, it scared the hell out of me. And I'll always remember my last day when I was leaving the meat industry. There's a great man in there, Eamon Hughes, who liked to play practical jokes with me. And I started my business. I had $2,000 saved. And 6 weeks before I left, I crashed a car into an ESB telegraph pole. And on the day I was leaving, the guards pulled up outside the factory, and a guard came in and asked for me. So I arrived in, and then there's one guard, and then a second guard comes in. So this is all very official. And they explained to me that I crashed into an ESB pole a couple of weeks ago, and that the ESB had a bill of €1,700 that I had to pay. And I just remember my face collapsing, because I had $2,000 in my pocket to start off. And then all of a sudden, when my face collapsed, the guard said, I'm only joking, Eamon Hughes put me up to it. And that's the kind of thing that used to happen all the time. We worked hard, but we had great fun in the place. So yeah.
You said a little earlier, I'm kind of wondering, did you always want to start your own business? You said that your dad taught you how to enjoy life. But I read, in preparation for this, that you grew up in a family farm, and your dad had said to you, don't become a farmer, do something that has a little less work and a little more money in it. And I think that was, it was interesting to hear that, but also to say that he taught you how to enjoy life, because it seemed like you kind of came from this very hardworking background, and that you may have had an ambition to kind of maybe do something on your own in the future.
Do you know what? I have very little. I love listening to people who had a grand plan and who sold things from the age of 10 and knew they were going to have a business. I didn't have any of that grand plan. I was very fortunate. I had an idyllic childhood, living on a farm with two wonderful parents, and I think that's a wonderful start in life. My mum is the glue of the family. It still is, thank God. My father has passed away, but he had a great influence in my life, and he worked hard, but he enjoyed life, and he was a great character, and he got on really well with people, and he'd give out to me later in life about working too hard. Which is interesting. So he was the center of every party, and people gravitated towards him, and he gravitated towards people. So I always saw that, and the sense of humor. I certainly get from my parents. You know, my mother bought me a condom machine for my 21st birthday. That's the kind of thing that you thought. By the way, it's still full. They might be out of date, but it's still full.
You still have it, which is good, yeah.
And my father would he'd be at a party and I'd watch him with people and the way he got on with them. And I was lucky to get both. There was hard work and there was humor around the place all the time. But really, I wasn't very good at the hard work and I was a pretty bad farmer. And my father did say to me, he said, look, you better find something that involves less work and earns more money. I've got the more money bit than farming, but that wouldn't be difficult. But the work bit, I haven't sorted out yet.
So take me back then. So you'd started the business. You had one customer, then a second customer. Did you have goals at that stage as to what it could be into the future? What were you kind of thinking? Do you remember at that time?
When I started the business, again, all I wanted to do was start a business. And my first ambition wasn't to rule the world. My first ambition was, could I make as much as I did when I was working for somebody else? And what I found is I have a lot of short-term goals, 1-3-year goals. And I remember very distinctly, I had my first mentor and we were turning over 250,000. And he said, now, how do we get this business to 1 million? And I remember going, God, would that be possible? I'm not sure how we would do such a thing. So I don't believe I had that ambition. But then when I got 250, we grew it to 1 million. And then when you get it to 1 million, you want to get it to 2 million. So I think my ambition has grown as the business has grown. Mm-hmm. But there was no grand plan at the beginning. We now have a 3-year plan all the time with regards to where we want to get to. And sometimes it goes backwards and then we get it back on side and we're going forwards again. And fortunately, I think now we're in a good position. Last year, I lost a key member of staff that hurt us badly and set us back a little bit. But in order to overcome that, I've hired 9 new people so that I'm not as exposed again. And I suppose one of the things I've learned is we grew the business, the amount of services we had in the business to accommodate our clients. So our clients would ask for, can you do something else? And, oh, yes, I can do it. And we would do it. And in fairness, we do have a motto in the place of get shit done. And we got stuff done. One of the key liabilities of the business originally was that every time a client asked me to do something, we would say yes. Mm. And so we grew kind of 6 different service lines. And we were a small business of, 20, we were 22 people last year. We've now up to 30 now. But we were quite exposed. If somebody left the business, then I'm right back in the middle of it, doing both my day job, my CEO job, and then I would have to assist with whatever job that person left and get stuck involved in it. So it was probably a liability and it held us back a lot within the business. But now that we've built the team and we've built the reputation and the clients in those services, it's now my greatest opportunity. So it's interesting how, and I found it throughout my life, sometimes when the worst things that happened here or the greatest liabilities become your opportunity in the future. So I believe that is the opportunity we have now. And as I said, I've spent the last 12 months, I put 240 hours into recruitment. I've recruited the team that I really want for now. And now our challenges are going to change. Mm-hmm. So now that I've built the team, I'm going to have to figure out how to grow the clientele and our business, because up until now, our business has been word of mouth and referral, and we've grown with our clients, etc. But I see now the future plan has got to be, how do we develop this business and put in procedures and systems to ensure we have a proper pipeline of work in the future, rather than we just get everything that's in front of us done.
Is the first million the hardest? You always hear that. I'm wondering, was it true in your case?
Yeah, well, if I ever write a book, my first book is going to be how to double your business and half your profit. I'm not sure there's going to be a great demand for that book. I think we've moved on from that one, hopefully now. We're on book number 2, which I hope will get back to maintaining margins again. Yeah, going from 1 person to 2 people is hard. Going from 2 to 3 is really hard. And I remember when I hired my third employee, I won't mention his name, but he knows the story well. He arrived, and I remember my office manager came in to me and went, by the way, we've nothing in the bank today. And I remember that moment well, going, how do we manage this? Mm. And you look at it now and you go, well, that's just part of growing a business. You have to take the plunge, because if you don't hire people, you can't grow the business. And it's a little bit like my original mentor going, how do we get from 250,000 to 1 million? That seemed like a huge daunting thing to me at the time. But once you hit it, you go, you know what? It wasn't that daunting. And I'm 20 years into business now. I suppose the only regrets are I didn't do things a little bit earlier. But at the same time, I didn't have the money to do them. So we could have either grown faster or be bankrupt, whichever.
Would you have done things in any way differently? So let's say it all kind of went away tomorrow and you had to start again. How would you think about it differently, if at all?
If I was looking at it in hindsight, I would probably have tried to build a leadership team in the business earlier and try to move myself into a more managing director role. And like at the moment, I'm still 50% of the time I'm managing director and 50% of the time I'm forensic engineer. And then if something else goes wrong, I throw that on top as well. And the key for me, where do I want to go in the future? What do I want for myself within the business is I would like to get to a stage where I'm the chairperson of the business, whereby I'm looking at the business. I love Paul Ryan said a word, the caretaker of the business. That would be my ideal scenario in the future. Because what do I love doing? I love meeting clients. I love meeting people. People is the bit that I really enjoy about the business and our team. And I like seeing people grow within the team. And for example, we had a strategy day last Friday. We had everyone in the team in doing strategy in the morning, and then clay pigeon shooting in the afternoon in a torrential storm, followed by a few drinks. And I just love mixing with my team, and I love mixing with the clients. If I could skip having to measure a road and write reports, I would do so. But at the moment, I'm doing both, and I'd like to think that I've hired much cleverer people than me that are better at engineering and better at environmental consultancy than I am. But I still have a road to go before all my clients realize that I'm the least useful engineer or environmental consultant in the business. And that's what I'm working at the moment. And would I have loved to have done that 10 years ago? Yes, I would.
Why do you think you're thinking about it now? Was it a money thing? Remember you said I didn't have the money to do it earlier. Do you think it was that? Or do you think could your mindset have shifted earlier, do you think?
Yeah, well, I was a late starter in life when it comes to marriage and children. So I had my first child at 42, I think. My first boy, yeah. So I have 3 boys. The first one was, I was 42. And I think that made me change what was happening. Up until that, I worked 80 hours a week and 7 days a week. But I also had a wife who did similar. So it made no difference. The two of us would work very hard in long hours. And by the way, I don't believe you can build a business without doing that. You just could probably start transitioning out of it a little bit earlier than I did. And then when baby 1 arrived and we kind of continued on, and then baby 2 was en route, and we had no home of our own. We were renting at the time. I had invested in 3 properties between 2005 and 2007, and I found out that I'm not a good property investor, and was underwater without a home of our own at the time, and with a business where I'm working 80 hours a week. And I just decided something has to change, and if I don't change, the outcome won't be any different. So at that stage, we decided I needed to grow the business. And bring in more people and take the plunge. And, sometimes we got it right and sometimes we got it wrong. But it was the starting point to grow the business and now grow the leadership team. And I'm nearly afraid to say that I think we're nearly in a good position, because business is a bit like sport. It has a great way, just when you think you're getting the hang of it, of bringing you back down to ground. But I think we have now built a good leadership team. And the last couple of people I've just come on board with us in the last month, and I'm hoping that leadership team will allow me more time to think about the business. And as I always say, I've spent a lot of my life with my head down and my arse up, and you're working hard, and my goal is to spend a bit more time with my head up and thinking about the business and trying to run a better business and improve the business and I suppose provide more support for the people who are in my business, rather than I'm flat out and they're flat out.
Let's talk a little bit about those kind of the lows, if you like, because you said earlier as well that it's kind of sometimes the liabilities that kind of inform the greater opportunities later on, and everything else. And I'm interested because you're very upbeat. You're obviously you're very yeah, optimistic, right? You can tell you're thinking about the future in a positive way. And it's interesting always when talking to business people, because there's so many lows along the way that I'm always wondering, why is it that this person is still going and they're still happy and they're still excited about the future? Because a lot of the times those parts are there, they can be very challenging, similar to what you were saying about what happened in 2008. Could you just talk a little bit about those moments and how you've kind of come out of them?
Yeah. I've read a wonderful. Sorry, I'm an avid reader, so I love reading books, but I can't remember what half of them are called. But I read a wonderful book, and it's this guy who built up moments in his brain. So these moments where you've overcome great difficulties, and I find the great thing about the experience that I have now is you've come over so many of these difficulties. When something happens, you dwell back on the previous moments and how you came out of them. And you use that, I suppose, with the caveat of this too will pass, and you just have to get your head down and get through it. But the more of these moments you get through, the more you realize I'll get through the next one as well. So even if I look back from the very first moment, I'd always say tearing my cruciate ligament ruined my illustrious football career. It was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I wasn't good enough to play football, first of all, so I was going to be a bum in Galway for the rest of my life if I continued at it. But B, because I had to go home, I met my first boss and got my first job, and that led to being able to start my own business and do everything. So that was the first point.
Mm-hmm.
Again, in the recession, I was a very poor property investor, as I mentioned, and I had this wonderful investment whereby I used to do 110% mortgages because I had no money. And 110% mortgages work really well if the market's going upwards, but when the market's going downwards and you've no money, it's not a really good place to be. But again, we got through it, and we got through it while having a bit of fun as well. So we had a great social life while being in plenty of debt and building a business, and then you get out of it, and then what, all those things that were weighing you down are actually assets. Not assets that made much money, but at least I didn't spend it in Leeson Street, so that was a starting point. And I was probably, at that time, I was likely to spend it in Leeson Street if the truth was told. I'm a great believer in spend it first and then earn it afterwards. It gives you great incentive to grow. But again, once you get through that, you bank those moments. So you bank those lows. And you have to remind yourself every now and then. And again, last year, I had a very key person in the business who left the business, who I really liked and wanted to stay in the business because I had a huge amount of time for it, and still do, by the way. And then I found I left gaps for clients. And our motto is to provide excellence. And when we didn't provide excellence, it upset my morals. We weren't looking after a particular client at the time. And luckily, I got stuck into it. We built the team up, and the team gathered experience, and we just told the client, hands up, we've done things wrong, but we'll stick by you. We're willing to lose a lot of money to stick by you and get the project finished. And I'm delighted to say at a later date, we got the project finished. And the client came back to me and said, do you know what? He says, a lot of your competitors could learn from from how you handled that. He said, you were available at all times. You were stuck in the middle of it. When I made a phone call, you answered. He says, I know others who don't answer that call when I make it when things are going wrong. And he said, you didn't talk about money till it was over. And that was a tough time again. But you know what? We're out of it again. And you just keep learning that these things are going to happen. If you put your head down and you do the right thing and you look after your clients, you get the far end.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remind me that when the next one hits the fan, okay? And I'm down again. But I'm hoping that I keep learning from those experiences.
Like, I think, losing a key person in the business, and you having to jump in to that role is probably not at all what you wanted to do at that time. And I think maybe, and this is just, it's conjecture, right? But, had you become chairperson of this business years ago, I think your ability, or certainly your desire to do that, might have been impacted, or you might not have been as likely to do it.
Well, I was always stuck in the middle of it. But I agree with you. If I was out of it as a chair at the time, things could have been different. But having said that, I feel like I'm 30, but I'm actually 52. I would like to be further on the journey of running the business rather than being in the middle of it all the time. And by the way, I think the people I have are better at being in the middle of it than I am. It's merely that some of our clients would like to have the personal touch of myself in it. And I want to be able to combine both. So I have to be very careful how I do this in the future. I want to be there for the clients all the time. That's the bit I want to be there for. But just to make sure that people who are better at the engineering or the environmental consultancy are doing the engineering and the environmental consultancy. And what I did find is, what inevitably occurs is, if someone important, if you develop leaders and you give them responsibilities, it's a wonderful thing. It takes a weight off your shoulders, and those people can start to carry out their areas of work, and then you get to go and do something else. But the problem is, if they leave, you've already decided to do something else. So now you're juggling a couple of different things. And what I find is, as my wife would say, I'm a man, so I can only do one thing at a time. Okay, so I'm quite good. If I can focus on what I'm trying to do, I'll do that well. But if you're juggling lots of different balls, it's very hard to do any of them right. And that's what I want to try and ensure that doesn't happen. And yes, I'll step into the business where I'm required and to do certain aspects of it. But I also want to make sure that the business is capable of running if I get hit by a bus tomorrow. And I think we're much closer to that now.
Talk to me about the values, right? Because you talked earlier on, you gave your 5 core values. Is that something you realized you kind of had to do? Have you learned that kind of the hard way? Because values is something, it's kind of an intangible thing that I don't think anyone starts off thinking about that when they start a business. But as the team grows, just something seems to click along the way. Is, we're going to need these values put in place, and we need to decide what they are. Can you talk to me about that specifically? What the reason was that you decided to put them in, and how they've kind of helped grow the business essentially?
Well, I think the culture and values evolve themselves. As I said, my father taught me humour, and Frank Mellon taught me excellence and work ethic. So I think they were naturally in me. That I enjoyed getting work done. I enjoyed doing it really well. I enjoyed the validation and praise of doing something well, but I always enjoyed getting on with our clients. So I think that's my nature. So I think the culture of our business is my nature initially, and then as the business grows, people, I'm in a group called EO, which have been a great help to me, and the idea people talked about, visions and core values, etc., none of which I knew anything about. So we decided to document it. So I think your culture should really be just documenting what you do and what you are. And we did that when we had I remember we had a team of about 10 people, and we said we'd sit down and we'd talk about what the vision and the core values are, and that they would say what it is rather than me. So I suppose I came up with the vision. Look, guys, I would like excellence with a sense of humour. That's my bit. And then what do you believe the core values are within that? And as I said, they completely overruled me with humour and put balance in, because they rightly said, look, the work-life balance is what we want. We want to have people who work hard but also get to enjoy their lives and live a fulfilled life and try and live up to their potential, both at home and at work. So I think that was a very important lesson for me, that it couldn't just be my culture. It had to be, I started the culture, but it had to evolve, and the people in the team had to decide what that culture was. And it's still evolving at the moment. And even on our last strategy day, we're talking about, but there's one or two things we probably need to tweak within our core values. But I think what those core values do, and the vision, it gives you something to run your business by. It gives you something to determine who are the right people in your business, or who are not the right people for your business. And sometimes you hire people who aren't the right fit for a business. Now, by the way, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that person. It just means they don't fit your vision. And it's important to try and keep. So what I've learned from that is trying to make sure we have the right people on the bus, but we also have them in the right seats. And I've made a mess of that, as many of my failures have over the time, of hiring the right people but giving them the wrong job.
Mm.
And assuming what job they would like to have, giving someone a management role when they didn't want a management role. They wanted a technical role. And I think we're learning now, when we're hiring people, that we have quarterly reviews. And during those quarterly reviews, we ask, well, where would you like to be this time next year? Or where would you like to be this time in 3 years' time? So that we can probably put them in the roles that suit them. And to make sure technical people are doing technical roles and good project managers are doing project management roles, and that people who have management skills are doing management. Now, I haven't done that particularly well over the past, but again, I think that's a learning that I've got, and I'm hoping to learn from that and to do better in the future.
How do you keep the values top of mind, for everyone? Are there things that you do, like having them kind of around the office or talking about them? How are they kind of, how do they stay alive within the business?
That's the key thing of culture. And I'm probably the wrong person to answer that question, because it's only our team that will be able to tell you, are we keeping the culture alive? But I can tell you what we proactively do is, yes, we mention our culture and our core values a lot. Our interview process, I'd say by the time people start with us, they are fed up listening to me talking about our core values and culture. We have it around the office. It's on the office as you come in. But do you know what? Everybody has it on the office when they come in. I'm hoping that we lead by example in the core values, or that I lead by example and that the leadership team lead by example. And what's interesting is we had a strategy day on Friday, and I stayed out of it, or as much as possible. And one of the key questions, I have one of our non-executives is a guy called Jerry Grant. And Jerry's excellent because he has scaled a business previously in engineering and environmental and understands it. And he has a real understanding of the environmental business. And he put out the question of, do we have a strong enough culture? And sorry, I should state, we also have Michelle Walsh, who is our other non-executive. And actually, between the two of them, they put out that question of, do we have a strong enough culture? Do we live up to the culture that we have? And what I'm glad to say is the feedback was very positive with regards to the culture that we have within the business and that we are living up to it. And realistically, I think more of that feedback than the signs up on the wall or me rabbiting on about it, whether it's over a cup of coffee or over 2 pints on a night out with the team. And so that has given me a little bit of validation and has given me the confidence that as recent as last Friday, people seem to believe that we are living that culture. But it's going to be a big challenge going forward as you grow the business, and we hope to double the business over the next 5-7 years. How do you maintain that culture? It was so easy when there's 10 of us and we all go out for a few beers. And even now at the moment, look, I know everybody very well within the business, but as it grows, that's going to change, and that's going to be a challenge for us.
Was it important to bring on the non-execs, and how did your kind of decision, why did you make that decision?
Well, we always say our business only has room for one of me, thank God. Everyone else is required to balance me out. and I've been very fortunate that from the very beginning, I've always had a mentor. Some of them did it for nothing at the beginning, thankfully, because we had nothing. And at the moment, and now we've tried to put a bit of structure into it, because for the last, I suppose, 2 years, I've gone, how do I build a business that A, has a value, and B, can run without me if I get knocked down by a bus? Because I'm conscious now, I have 3 young kids. If something happened to me, the business needs to continue on. So part of that is building the leadership team and giving them the responsibilities of it. But the other part is maintaining the culture within the business as that grows. So I believe if the leadership team, which I do believe are really indebted into the culture of the business, that they will emanate the culture to new people. I'll always meet them. I'll always meet every new person, but that the others will emanate it as well, because culture is what you do. It's not what you write in a wall.
What about EO? So you mentioned there you're a member of the Entrepreneurs Organization. You said that's helped you a little bit with some of this stuff. In what way?
Oh, well, I'm in EO 7 years, and I really like the organization, although I don't like the name, because I don't consider myself an entrepreneur. God, if you mention the word entrepreneur now, and I was going, get it. My father would have given me a kick in the arse.
It's the same with a number of the members though in EO, and there is something about that French title almost that it just doesn't sit well with Irish people in a way.
Yeah, to me, an entrepreneur is someone who's built lots of businesses and develops them. I'm somebody who has a business, but I do like the organisation, and as I said from the beginning, the big problem I had at the time when I met EO is I was thinking about growing the business, but it was head down and arse up, and I was flat to the mat working. And I suppose EO actually occurred at a similar time to when my first and second children were arriving. So it was good timing for me. And what I found, and still find about it, is even when you're crazy busy, you have to meet these people, your peers, a group of 7 people who all have their own business. You have to meet them once a month. And when you meet them, you have to be present, number one, and you have to be prepared. So no matter what else is happening around it, for that day where I'm meeting my peers in EO, I am thinking about the business. And actually for the day before it, or at least half the day before it, I'm also thinking about the business because I have to prepare for that meeting. So I found that if I have EO, I now have a day and a half which I must think about the business.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I've non-executives and we have a board, I now have these other day where the board meeting is, and I have another day before the board meeting. So if nothing else, I have 4 days in my month now where I must contemplate the business and be the managing director of that business and think about where it's going. So that's the real help I've found. And yes, I've always had mentors, but sometimes when you had a mentor, you could let it slide. You know what? You wouldn't meet them for 3 months or 6 months. And all of a sudden you found you were working, but you weren't growing the business. And that's where I think both EO and having non-executives really assist, that you now have a structured format that I must turn up on that day and I must spend my 4 days preparing for those meetings and contemplating the business of where it's going.
You mentioned that you had kids a little bit later than some of your peers, perhaps, and you also talked about that time in 2008 when you had invested in a couple of properties at 110%, and but then you came out of it with a sense of humour, and I'm kind of wondering how you managed to do that, because it's not that easy a thing to do, and I think everyone, if they're honest about it, who comes in here and has talked about it, said, the whole balancing family and the pressures of that, and kind of, I suppose, personal finances and the business and everything is just very, very challenging. And sometimes it all comes to a head like it has with you. And sometimes it's just kind of, still in the middle of it, if you like. And I'm just wondering how you kind of dealt with that situation with a bit of lightheartedness.
Yeah. I'm still in the middle of it, by the way. My kids are 9, 7 and 2. So we're still balancing everything at the moment. But I think I'm very fortunate. I have great friends. And I've had great friends since I was 4 years old in Stackallan and Rathkenny and Meath, to going to college in Galway, to boarding school in Gormanston, and my pals that I've met since that, many of them in Leeson Street and partying around Dublin over the time, and we still hang out together. So I still go away to Spain with 6 guys once a year for 5 days, and we've always done that. And we meet once a quarter for lunch. And I find that's what helps me. Because you might sit down and start talking about your problems. Well, they just start slagging you fairly quickly and taking the piss out of you. And telling you to cop on to yourself. And I do think we all get those lows. We all get that feeling of, God, I'm making a mess of this. Nothing's working. And you do need friends to ground you. And as I say, if they're not abusing you, they don't like you. So your friends, I find, are the thing that ground me the most. And when things are not going well, I meet up with them, and we have a couple of drinks and dinner, and you get perspective. And do you know what? Perspective is something that and gratitude is something I'm very conscious of. I don't always practice it. And there's many a time I'm starting to feel sorry for myself every now and then. Or, sometimes the risks of the business or the responsibilities or the amount of things you have to do weigh on you. And other times, by the way, that's light. So it's an amazing thing. A business can sometimes feel very heavy on your shoulders, and sometimes it can feel very light depending on the mood you're in and how things are going. But perspective is very important. So the first thing I do, I get up this morning and I go, do you know what? I live in a lovely house. I have a beautiful wife, Aoife. I have 3 great kids who are, when they're not trying to kill each other, that is. And, I get into a nice car and I'm driving over here to meet you this morning. You know what? Isn't that a wonderful start in life? That's great. And I try to remind myself of that all the time. And when I'm out with our team, I'm going, do you know what? I really enjoy the team that we have. I enjoy getting on with people, right? Whether it's a coffee or whether it's a few pints or whatever it is. I love that. I love meeting with my clients. And I find as long as I'm doing those 3 things, I always remain optimistic. Because every time I get out and I meet a client and I chat to people, I'm coming home buzzing. And that's why I would like to do more of that. What I find sometimes is when you're not out doing that, when you create a life which is too busy, which regularly do, and you're stuck in the middle of the work and you're working till 10 o'clock at night or you're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you forget to go meet with your team and visit your clients or hang out with your family and your friends, that's when you start to feel low. But at least I know that now. So I do A, try and get out more, meet more people, and B, exercise is very important to me.
Gratitude is, I find it's an amazing, almost like a magic trick, because it's the kind of thing where, and we all forget about it, and we all, we forget that, how lucky we are in life and everything else. Like even just to be born, in Ireland at this time and everything is just amazing. But it's easy to forget and to think, God, I've lost a client or I've lost, so a key person that it can overwhelm. But I always find gratitude is such a an easy and kind of clear way out of those moments.
I completely agree with you. Yeah, and as you say, you do get caught up in your own life sometimes and things that are going wrong, and once you start to think about what you have, God, I'm so grateful for what I have. Like I'm one of the most fortunate people in the world. And I think you've hit we've hit the geographical lottery by being in Ireland. Growing up on a farm with 2 people who loved me, we don't have to face wars or poverty or, I did in college have to figure out where the next meal was going to go because I drank it the night before. But we know that I now can buy a steak if I want to and, have a nice holiday and live a reasonable lifestyle. And yeah, do you know what? The more you do think of that and the more you realize how fortunate you are, the easier it is to handle the responsibilities and things that go wrong. And I always start with what's the worst thing that can happen?
Tom, Rowan, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this morning. I think that's an excellent place to leave it. Thank you so much. And we wish you the best of luck in the future.
Thank you, Conor. I'm going to dine out now that I've been on the same podcast as Michael Smurfit.
Sorted. You're sorted. In great company there.